Episode 27 of All the Horrible Things. What are we talking about this week, Mr. Bagnosi?
We're talking not only Prey, but the Predator franchise. Because
The whole Predator franchise, but we're focusing up on this Prey because this is what's the most relevant. I want to ask you, because it went straight to Hulu, right?
yes, it all
How well does this do if it was dropped in the theaters?
not as well, I don't think. I think it broke records on Hulu. I think it's its biggest premiere ever. And I think if you had just put it on or released in theaters, you would get your horror fans who were going to watch it regardless. But by putting it straight to
Right.
home, I think you opened up that audience to the masses. I think
I completely
Yeah.
agree, and it became less of like a macho movie, if you will. That first Predator is macho man's across the
I
board,
mean,
right? We got two governors in that one between Schwarzenegger and Jesse
That's
Ventura. But yes, I think this made it much more accessible, giving it kind of the antithesis of the title with Prey instead of the Predator, and you have essentially a female lead. I'm not counting the Predator, which I want to talk a lot about
Yeah,
that,
yeah.
just the nature of its being. But this one I feel like became much more accessible because we have a period piece for one, and there are so few good Native American movies out there. I was trying to think about what are some good ones. I can think of one that I love and two that I've seen that I know other people sort of
Okay.
like. The one I love is Last of
Oh
the
yeah, I
Mohicans.
just rewatched that.
Love that movie.
Yeah.
Daniel Day, Madeline Stowe. In fact, there was a reference to it in the latest episode of Only Murders in the Building, where Martin Short's character has to abandon some dips in a stairwell, and he says, "I will come for you. I'll come back for you." He's quoting Daniel Day
That's
underneath the
amazing.
waterfall to Madeline
That's
Stowe.
amazing.
It was great. But that to me is probably my favorite Native American movie. I remember thinking Dances with Wolves is okay. I'm not a Kevin Costner fan. And The New World, I know, got panned. That was the Colin Farrell
Right.
one. But other than that, I mean, certainly in terms of action,
Sure.
Native Americans, I don't think there's a lot out
Well,
there.
I'll tell you.
That's what I think is part of the beauty of Prey, is it's really bringing us something that we haven't seen.
And I'll tell you, one of the largest problems with those three movies that you mentioned, those were all led by white males. All of those movies
That's a good point.
were driven not to bring in actual Native American actors, although Last of the Mohicans and Dances with Wolves has Graham Greene, who's an amazing actor.
Right. It did have the surrounding.
Yes. However, this
Certainly not our Irishman Daniel Day.
this movie, I believe, is the first all indigenous cast Native American film. I think. I mean, granted, you have the actors who are playing the French traders, but this main cast
Right.
was completely indigenous, and I don't think that's ever happened before. Another movie to add to your list of Native American movies was Thunderheart with Val Kilmer, and
Okay.
but
What was the premise of that one? Because I didn't see that.
that had to do with
That slipped.
I believe a murder on tribal land, and they brought in Val Kilmer as this.
Okay.
But the problem with that is the same problem with the other movies we just mentioned. It was led by a white male actor who was, the hero. They needed an outsider to come in to fix problems. That's ridiculous. I will say, I don't know if anyone's seen it, but also on Hulu, very funny show, Reservation Dogs.
Reservation Dogs, Taika Waititi, definitely
Produced-
enjoying that one. I would say that there are some comedy and dramas out there with
Yes.
Native Americans that are pretty decent.
Yes.
Smoke Signals being one of them from back in the day. But no action. And honestly, Native Americans were like the first action heroes in a way on this continent.
Well, they
and I think that's really
were.
displayed well in this movie, that they're able to, conquer the lands
Yes.
and conquer any sort of
Yes.
animal that they came across, which is amazing. Certainly not something the Englishmen were doing in the 1700s.
No, and that's a great
So-
point. They
so-
were some of the first action stars, but they were also played by white people. But not only that, they were the first villain.
That's
Which
true.
wasn't fair. We're coming in and taking land, and then also you're the bad guy for some reason because you're not handing over.
Here's-
That's the thing I
here's
loved
some
about Prey.
chicken pox for you.
Yeah, exactly. That's the thing I loved about
completely
Prey.
agree with you there. And part of why that happened is I read an article stating how one of the producers on it, I think her name was, I don't know how to pronounce the first name, it's Jahne. It seems like it's like a Jane sort of thing, Jane Meyer, but she is
Jan, I
actually
think.
part of the Comanche Nation. Jan Meyer, part of the Comanche Nation herself. I guess she's a Blackfoot as well. So she was one of the main producers. Went there, and I guess the director Dan Trachtenberg really gave her a lot of say in making it authentic. And I think the
Yeah.
authenticity, they're actually speaking Comanche when we do get those moments of the Comanche language. That's legit.
Yeah, it is.
And then I guess like the rituals in the essentially teepees, everything they're using, all the tools of the trade, is all
Accurate.
backed by someone who is part of the tribe, which I definitely appreciated.
That's amazing. And
legitimacy.
I saw a brief interview with the actor who plays our main character's older brother, who is the
Tabe.
Yeah, he's also pronounced the war chief. He had mentioned that at one time in development of this film, there was a chance that it was going to be all in Comanche. The film, like all the actors were going to be speaking Comanche, which would have been.
What do you think about that possibility?
Well, here's the thing. That actor said that he went into the audition and he did it in English and he did it in Comanche. He said he has learned a lot of languages, which I thought was really cool. I think, you know, as stubborn as Americans are with, you know, just.
It's not gonna break records on Hulu if people start it and they're having
and they have to read. God forbid.
The nature of America.
God forbid.
Terrible education system. Most of us can't read over here in the States. So we definitely, I feel like, needed that English language, but I like that they spruced in some of the actual
it was certainly one of the first things I noticed about the movie as it was starting. I was thinking, wow, this is sort of that film rule that they've created over the years, that we're hearing them in English, but they're supposed to be speaking Comanche. It's just that we can understand them. And we learn that when we get to one of the traders, and he's like, I've learned your language. And I'm like, oh, you're speaking English. But it was certainly crossed my mind when it started. I was thinking, that's interesting that, you know, they're not speaking in Comanche. It was,
and it's cool because it was the Northern Great Plains. Do you think this is kind of our zone? Is this Illinois? Was it potentially Illinois?
No, I don't.
Where did you think it was? Because there was too many
mountains. It had to have been, and I don't even. I mean, this is my poor public education. I don't know if the Great Plains are considered up into Montana, because to me it looked like it should have been like a North Dakota or a Montana. Although I don't think you've got mountain ranges like that in North Dakota either. It almost looked, and I know that they filmed this movie in Canada, which, you know, like probably up in Vancouver. It looked like the Rockies, though, you know.
It did. It was a little too mountainous for having it state that it's the Northern Great Plains, and then you see ridiculous mountains in the background. That quibbles. Right. Let's really quick talk about how this movie is maybe better than the first one, and it's because they track the same best elements ultimately, and that is the setting. Ultimately, in the first one, you have the jungle, and I don't think any movie does the jungle better than that first Predator movie.
Agreed.
The way that that's filmed, you're like flowing through it. I mean, the leaves are constantly in the way of the camera in a good way. In this one, I feel like you are in the thick forest for most of the movie in a way that just really immerses you. I felt like it was as immersive as the first one in bringing us into the setting.
100%. It creates that unequal challenge for the Predator, which ultimately is what the Predator wants. It wants to be challenged to the ultimate hunt, if you will. And the same thing's happening in the first movie. The Predator can only know so much about this jungle, like our squad.
Evens the playing field. They like to even the playing field. That's actually something that pops up in The Predator, which let's mention just really quick. In the first movie, we have Shane Black, who's one of the guys who's going in there they're essentially lied to. They're really going to rescue a CIA agent. And then they're dealing with Russians, and Schwarzenegger's been lied to by Carl Weathers, who gets his comeuppance. But Schwarzenegger's been lied to. But I wanted to bring it back to the Predator, and ultimately how at the end of that, you have one of the Predators who's trying to upgrade the DNA of humanity to make them more on the same level as the Predators, even the playing
Right,
field again.
right.
So that's right. When we're talking about the setting, being in the jungle evens the playing field. That's why two doesn't work as
Well,
well.
no,
I mean, certainly the writing's a thousand times
yeah,
worse, but you're putting the Predator in, you know, a city, and it just doesn't work. It doesn't have that same sort of like dread factor of being in the wild,
right.
and it really kind of takes away from the themes that made that first Predator work. And that's what I see happening in this new one is you get that just primal native sense of it that you don't get in a lot of the other Predators tries the
Right.
one with Adrian Brody, but it's a little too slick,
Yes.
a little too formulaic too. You know, it's that 2010 zone where it's kind of paint by numbers. I still really enjoyed a lot of it, but it's one of those things where you don't really get to know the characters in the way I would argue you do in the first one, and you certainly do in this new one, Prey.
yes. Yes.
They're
Yeah.
kind of more stock archetypal. And while that's kind of the case in that first one, I still feel like all the guys really had their own, personality. And that's why I brought up Shane Black, because he was the director of the new one, The Predator, from
Yeah.
2018. And he happened to be the first victim of the
Yeah.
Predator
In the first movie.
of the team in the first
Yeah.
one. So, and he was the guy that was telling all the really, really bad jokes about female
Yeah. Yeah.
anatomy.
Yeah.
Uh,
Now,
so he had it coming.
it's interesting because when I was rewatching Predator 2, I was thinking this is the same problem. I mean, our character has the same problem, right? They don't know anything about the Predator. They're learning everything again. So it was almost just like a really bad remake of the first movie in the city, which they thought,
Right.
at the time, especially in the 90s when they were, although very, very weird. They filmed the movie in 1990 and it takes place in 97 as if it was some sort of dystopian future, which was very weird that they thought.
And they still got the same cars from 1990.
Well, there's that, but then all their guns have some sort of weird like scope on it, like they thought that was going to be a thing. And also, they did some really weird things by choosing the gangs were Jamaican and Colombian, I think, which is a really weird choice.
Yeah, I didn't really like that. What the movies do with people of color could be its own cast entirely. I don't think it's as conscious of societal issues as it's been in this new one, because I do feel like it's dealing with the analogous nature of the French and not the English as well, but we focus on the French here, invading this land in the same way the Predator is invading Earth. We have that analogy that works similarly to what's going on with, ultimately, you got the Cold War as the backdrop of that first one, right? Because it does last into the early 90s, and this is 1987 in the first one, and the Russians are the adversaries who have taken the CIA agent in the first movie, whose name I don't know if you're aware of this or if you remember.
I know.
What is it?
Jim Hopper.
What's Jim Hopper?
Jim Hopper, which also has to be, is David Harbour's character's name. And I know for a fact people are blowing it out of proportion and trying to draw a conclusion and merge these two worlds that Jim Hopper is the same Jim Hopper because he talks about fighting in a war. And at that time period, this takes place in the 80s. What would that have been? Where would he have been? Really, leap to try to.
It is a leap, but it's an integral character in Predator, and the way that the Duffer Brothers do integrate all the lore from these 80s movies, and obviously we're talking about it as a horror movie. Predator is certainly action, but at its heart, this is something I really want to talk about, and why the first one and this newest one work so well is their slasher movies without acknowledging that they're slasher movies, because essentially we have one person of the party at a time getting sliced and diced out of the picture. And the first one, as I mentioned, is such a macho man movie, but this new one really evolves in that we do have a final girl, right? We have a final girl who's dealing with, throughout the entirety of the movie, being underestimated because she's a girl, right? So it's dealing with these gender issues, I feel like, in this new one in a really important way that I feel like maybe they tried to dabble with race issues in the second one and stuff like that, but it was never as effective as I feel like they tackled gender in this one. And it's really the only one I can think of that does gender well. Because let's think about our female characters in the previous film.
Well, in the
right?
very first
You
movie,
have the woman that they capture, who's really part of like what do you call it? The guerrilla.
yeah, like an
right?
anti.
She can't be trusted. She can't be trusted.
But she's a badass.
And ultimately, she's fairly badass. I don't really remember what she did that was that badass, other than getting sprayed with blood when she was being carried around the jungle. Does she actually?
Well, I just would have
fight.
No, I just would have said
I can't remember
her role in this movie and what she does in the situations she's put herself in to save her people, and get rid of the oppression. That's I would say she's a badass.
You're right. Her role and just the bravery of being in that situation. I'm with you there. The second one, we certainly got his cop buddy that's with him, who's a tough cookie.
She is,
but she doesn't really get a payoff, and I'm not sure.
No, and they also
do we care about any of the characters other than Danny Glover and maybe Gary Busey?
No,
in that second
there has to be deleted scenes from this movie because remember they established that she's pregnant.
Oh wow. Yeah, talk about it.
They throw it away, and I don't know if we're supposed to believe that maybe she's got this secret relationship with Danny Glover's character. I don't know because they did not let us know, but they did let us know a little bit about the Predator who was not willing to kill this individual because she had a baby. And I'm thinking if that was the payoff, I don't know if I care enough that the Predator is that kind.
It's hard to care about much that happened in that second one. And even as much as I love Danny Glover, his character was his Lethal Weapon character. I don't feel like he was bringing any sort of new insight
I didn't buy into how he was this huge action. They didn't do enough. I mean, they show him running into gunfire in the beginning, but it was more to like save his fellow officers. It wasn't.
The guys that were wounded.
Yes.
Yeah,
I mean, that was his job. That's what you're supposed to do. I didn't buy into the fact because there wasn't enough backstory on his character. They gave more information about Bill Paxton's character being the Lone Ranger coming in.
That's right.
I think that those characters weren't.
It missed the mark. Predator 2 missed the mark. However, we'll talk about it in a little bit. It's integral to this one, and I never thought there would be a connector to Predator 2. I don't think a lot of people remember Predator 2. I mean, I'd seen it a couple times as a kid, and I had to revisit it to really be able to talk about it at all because it was kind of super forgettable. But one thing I want to talk about that Predator 2 missed the mark on, even though it does lead to this prey, is the first one and this one work so well because there's only one Predator, right? There's only one. I think when you add more, and granted that it's not until the end of Predator 2 that we get the whole team of Predators, but subsequent ones all have multiple Predators, including Predators itself from 2010, and then 2018 also has multiple Predators as well. And I think just there's something about the one-on-one, the mano-y-mano that works so well with this Predator series that this new one just killed it with that. It makes it scarier.
And it's less confusing, by the way. I mean, these characters don't talk. It just gets a little bit messy when you introduce more Predators.
Yeah, I agree. Although I do like seeing the variant faces of the Predators. There's something to that.
That is a little bit different in The Predator, right?
Because the new one, I mean, this is 1719 that it's set, but it's uglier. It's definitely, it seems like it's like a Neanderthalic sort of
evolved
Predator
into a less ugly Predator.
Which is a big question for me because we got to talk about it. If this is set in 1719 and there is this connection to Predator 2 that involves the gun from these French trappers that ultimately is acquired, I guess, in this one, right?
Correct. But
in Prey, it's acquired, but is it that same? It's not that same Predator that then gives it to Danny Glover as the reward for being.
It's not.
It's not. Okay. So they don't live that long. That's something I'm really curious about, is the lifespan of a predator, unless it's been
I
slain.
think it's fair to say they do not live that long. And I think it's also fair to say what they did there by establishing that gun and tying it into, I mean, I think that they set up the fact that they come back. Right? Because at the end of Prey, we are now left with this gun in her possession. How does it get back into the hands of the predator? And I think that's kind of how
is that setting up Prey too? Is that what we're getting? Is that the likelihood?
That's what I'm suggesting.
Yes. Okay. How they get the gun back from her, which doesn't bode well for Naru if they're getting that gun from her in the next one, right?
Unless it's passed down to a different family member.
That's true. They can work it out. Let's talk about Naru really quick, because our actress Amber Midthunder, and as you mentioned, she does have Native American heritage herself. What do you think about this casting?
I loved it. I have seen her in a couple other projects, and
really. What else have you seen her in?
I saw her in a really interesting straight to Netflix movie with Liam Neeson about ice road trucking. I forget the name of it right now. It's probably called Cold or something. But I thought she was a really interesting character in that, and I liked her in that. And now I'm blanking on the other projects I've seen her in, but I know I have.
I liked her. I thought she was effective. When I was watching it with Amara, she mentioned something that kind of stuck with me, in that it looked like she was going to Coachella. Just she looked so modern, I guess. And granted, these people that look like that going to Coachella are really culturally appropriating themselves, that of which was accurate then. She just looked too modern, I guess. Gotcha. But once you got into it, I didn't think it mattered. I did see what she saw in that. It seemed like she was going to Burning Man or something, and wasn't actually in 1719. I didn't feel that way with any of the other actors, though. They all seemed in their time, right, I guess. But there was something to that where I saw some of modernity even through the way she talked and expressed herself, and I don't know. I did enjoy it, and granted, I mean, she surpasses any of that, and that was really toward the beginning. But there was something to that. It did seem like, I don't know, she was wearing makeup not necessarily in the way the Native Americans would. It was more movie makeup versus when you have.
That's a tough one.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
That's a tough one, because I know the director went to certain lengths to make sure. Here's an example: the dog, which is a fantastic character, and
yes,
very rarely does a character like that make it entire movie, and I was very pleased to see that. That type of
he almost bit it though. The French almost took him out.
I know. That type of dog, apparently, I think it's called a Carolina, was one of the first breeds ever brought to America. So
really,
16,000 years ago, when we have a land bridge from Russia to Alaska, that's when men started inhabiting this part of the world. And those were the dogs they brought with them, which is a very small but amazing detail that the director made sure, like, okay, if there was to be a type of dog, what would it be? The other cool thing, though, is that character was also paying homage to the dog in Mad Max that Mad Max had. I think it was in the sequel, actually. Mad Max has a dog, and I think that's what Dan was trying to do with that. Now, I also just remembered that our main star here, Amber, was in the show Legion.
Oh, thank you. Okay. Yes, I absolutely loved that.
And she was great in that.
She grew to be great in that, I feel like. I did like her by the end of the show, 100%. Because it was a really interesting character, because she's half old white man and half
exactly.
Her character's like two characters in one, so it's a really hard part to pull off, but I was pretty satisfied with what she did there. Thank you for that. That's exactly what I remembered her from.
So my point was, let's move. The makeup may have been part of what the Comanche did, and not other. I don't know enough about that. I liked when she had the black across her eyes. I thought it looked really badass.
Yes, for sure. And that's actually something I want to mention too. Is I feel like the advertising for it, even the little that I've seen, even just the front page of Hulu when it came out, is so effective because you got that
I
neon
know.
predator
Yeah.
blood streaked across her. It makes you want to watch it. I feel like with the PR team for this one really nailed it. Of course we were going to watch it no matter what,
Yeah.
but I could
Right.
see people that aren't familiar with the franchise or really marginalize what Predator is because Schwarzenegger was part of it or whatever, for whatever reason. Or the fact that it was cheapened so much via the Alien versus Predator series, could get back on board and acknowledge the fact that it is moving the
Yeah.
series
New
further, and
life.
there's places for it to grow. There is that, like I said, in the same way horror can be metaphoric. Predator had that potential to be metaphoric and hasn't since the first one really done it effectively as it has in my opinion.
Completely agree. And brilliant where we start this. If it's taking this into a new direction, we could now pop into the 1800s. We could pop into the 20s,
Right.
Predator versus Al Capone, which is a terrible idea. But the point is, you've got these great moments in American history if that's what we're going to do.
That's true. Yes, because let's not forget that this does establish this is the first time a predator has hunted on Earth,
Right.
because they make that pretty abundantly obvious. I feel like because it seems like he is actually kind of going up the apex predator chain.
Right.
It's finding its way to man being the biggest
Right.
predator on
The
Earth. Because what does it
snake.
start with?
Yes.
The snake, and she's the first one to like notice who would skin a snake. Why would they do this? And they're not eating it. They
Right.
just
Right.
skinned it. And then he moves on to the dog, right? Or the wolf. The wolf.
Right.
I'm
The
sorry,
wolf.
not the dog. The wolf, which is a great scene where it's
Great
him be the
scene.
wolf.
Great scene.
Oh my
I was a
goodness!
little
And then
disappointed.
later, because I was, what were you disappointed?
The wolves hunt in packs. I wanted to see him up against an entire pack of wolves.
Oh, touche.
You know,
Yeah, that might have been
but
fun.
I understand what
Um,
was happening there.
yes. And let's talk a little bit about how it is the first time. So we have, as you noted, kind of a more primal looking face, a different type of mask, more of a stone mask instead of the metal mask. Um, and of course, I don't know if you remember, but he still has the little thing on his helmet that's
Correct.
his gun, but instead of shooting out the blaster or whatever it was in Predator from the 80s, it's just arrows. It's very similar to, he doesn't have any sort of explosive weapons in
Right.
this, which I think is kind of cool. He's, in terms of his weapons, similarly using that which the Native Americans are at the time. So I definitely dug that.
Yes. I mean, there was some really cool moments though. Like, even though he's not shooting out lasers, he still has the technology to, use
Right.
the laser. And this is the first time man has seen what a laser would look like. And they were mesmerized by it. It was really, really cool scene.
Yeah.
I also think it will.
And it was the first time you'd ever seen the three red lasers like separate, because it's always a triangle in every other one that
Correct.
shoots the laser directly at something. But this one, it started splitting up. One of the three went to the eyeball and the other one to the chest. And it was, it split out the three arrows in three different spots that were all kill
Yeah,
shots. You know what I mean? Guaranteeing that this
I
thing
think that was just the
would.
director coming in and making an improvement on that. Like, why
Yes.
not? Why not try
Yes.
this?
I completely agree with you. There is two aspects that I felt like were more advanced than we've seen in later Predators. One, of course, just has to do with special effects, I'm sure. Being his invisibility
Yeah.
is so much
So
more
much
effective
better.
in this
So
movie.
much better.
It's kind of like more of a rippling water than it is like
a blur.
the layered lines, especially in that first one. I don't even remember. Just like, it's like a Russian doll in a way,
Yeah.
the way that they stack on each other. I felt like that was great. Plus, in all of the earlier movies, you always see the Predators using some sort of salve to fix itself, making these crazy concoctions. It's really harped on in the second one.
The scene in
In
the
this one, it has the scene in the bathroom
in
in
Predator,
Predator 2
2
is notorious. But this one, the only time we see him using any chemicals, which is something, it's it's a trope of the Predator movies, him using all these kind of like juices and stuff. Anyways, in this one, he has like this mist, which seemed to dissolve the organic matter on the wolf's face, so that he could get to the skull, which they collect all the skulls. The mist just seemed more advanced to me than stuff he uses 300 years down the
Right.
line, just dripping stuff to I mean, again, that was an improvement on the lore, but not necessarily on the timeline of what they would be doing.
Right.
Feels like a future Predator would be using a
Yeah,
dissolving
it was a
mist.
little bit backwards in the sense that like some of his technology was advanced, and then some of it was, I think, supposed to give the idea that their technology isn't there yet, like the helmet, right?
Yes, absolutely. I can forgive it. I can
Of
definitely
course,
forgive it.
I'm not trying to.
It
Yeah,
does
I'm not trying to find flaws. I
so much
loved it.
amazing. Yes. Enough so I've actually watched it twice now.
Nice.
It was that good. Granted, for the cast as well. But one other thing I want to mention, the first one and the second one have in common, and I think what makes it work is that there's stoic performances. There's no goofball characters. You know what I
Right.
mean? This did not need Predators don't need like ridiculous comedic relief. And granted, Shane Black, I guess you could say, was sort of that in the first one, but he literally only had the two jokes and then he's dead. In this one, I just feel like when you have the serious characters in a Predator movie, it works.
Well,
better.
how about how
You know what I mean?
insane
You know what I'm
Thomas?
saying
Yes,
there?
like
And how
Thomas
it's
Jane's
not
character.
distracting? Yeah.
I mean that I love Thomas Jane, but his character was so out there. It was almost like that character Murdoch in the A-Team. It's like, wait a minute, you're insane.
Yeah.
You were insane. Why? I don't know.
Okay, and let's talk about Predators here, because I feel like that's another one where we got just some outlandish characters that don't really help. You have the guy from The Hateful Eight, who's also in Vice Principals. He's like this horrible character who was in prison on death
Walton
row.
Goggins.
And Walton Goggins,
Yeah.
thank you. And he's just over the top horrible. We're like, and then you, of course, on top of that, have Topher Grace, who's then a serial killer at the end. It was unclear to me, I guess, in Predators, how they amassed all of these characters that were all, I guess, predators in their own right.
Yeah.
But how do the Predators have a sense of what's going on culturally and politically, or like to know that this guy was a serial? Can they read headlines and stuff where they would know Topher Grace's character was a serial killer to collect him, to put him on the island?
Now,
Predators has some big holes for
yes,
me.
I will agree with that.
That one from 2010.
I could see where you're definitely making that that connection. I would also argue, though, in Predator 2, it's very much established that Predator is only after people who have weapons. And we see that on the subway in Predator 2, like he ends up killing all those civilians, but because they're all armed. So, is there, now this is me defending it, which is probably not even needed, but is there a chance that all these people who were assembled and put onto this Predator planet, were they all just found in combat? Because I think they even established that. They're like, I was fighting in Russia. I was fighting, or I was in the jungle. Or was Topher Grace in the act of murder then? I mean, is that,
okay?
That's, I'm taking a long shot on there, but just to try to justify it and then try to tie it all together.
That is the only thing that would make sense. I don't know how, if Walter Goggins was about to be put to death, who's he fighting? Maybe, I guess, one of the guards.
Could have been, yeah, because his teeth are knocked out, right?
I'm gonna run with your theory on
I
that.
don't know.
That's right, because that's the only thing that would make sense, I guess, because I don't think they can read, and that's actually one of the few things that is a trope in Predators that was missing from this one. There was no voice mimicking, right? There was no voice mimicking. They make such a big deal in all the other movies of how the Predators will record the voice of some of the humans and then use that voice later to lure
which is
other
and Predator 2 used more as like a gag. What is he like? Candy got like, I don't know. You're right,
but it works effectively, I feel like, in the first one, especially because when he's about to self-detonate and then he uses the guy's laugh that he had recorded.
Iconic.
Is great. Predators, when Danny Trejo's character is like down and they're not sure if he's dead or not, but you do hear his voice and we know it's the Predator, but they don't. I thought that was effectively done too. I liked
Uh,
its ability to mimic the
uh,
voices. I thought that's such a great like duck call sort of thing for a
you know what
hunter
I would?
that a hunter would
I
do.
think you're absolutely right. I'm trying to run through Prey in my head, and you know what it is? It's because they don't have that updated helmet. That's what it is.
Okay,
You know, it
that's got to be
probably
it. Yeah,
records.
the bone helmet, not
It's the
the
updated helmet
electronic. Yeah,
because it's such
I
a
get that.
great thing. You're right.
Here's one thing that all predators have that prey didn't have, that would have nothing to do with um, technology, and that's bodies being hung from the tree skin.
Yeah.
It's in every other one except for this one.
Yeah.
That's such a staple. Why do? Granted, we get animals that have been skinned, and
Right.
granted, not even just by the predator, because the French destroy all the buffalo
Yeah.
and skin them. That's a gruesome scene of all the dead buffaloes. But that's such a big part of Predator, to see those bodies hanging from the trees. And
Yeah.
certainly when I was a kid, that was such a memorable
Oh,
imprint for
absolutely.
me, to see those bodies
No,
hanging from the jungle
you're
trees.
right. And
I think they could have worked that in a little bit. You know,
this could have been one of those moments though too, where maybe it was too gory and they removed it. Maybe they did see. I mean, because it's set up. It's set up with the snake. It is so. The
True.
payoff would have been so easy to justify, but maybe it was too violent. I don't know. I'm trying to make an excuse because I don't know why they wouldn't do that. It is part of the franchise. Is Predator just not there yet? Does he not know how to skin a human?
Right. Well, yeah.
I don't know.
Maybe he just didn't have the time to do it yet. You know, because for the most part, all the people that he had skinned, he'd had the opportunity. But for the most of this movie, he's kind of like on the go, either chasing her or chasing the French guys who are after him. Speaking of another trope, we do get a little bit of this, but traps are such a big part of the hunter prey dynamic. All the other films have traps set. We have the French setting traps for him in this one, which involves them tying Naru and Tabe to, I guess, a tree, and then ready to pounce on him. But of course, he's able to thwart this.
Right.
One of the best action sequences, partly because it's so smoky there too, foggy and smoky. Just a really fun set piece that I just absolutely adored the action throughout the entirety of the movie. I thought all the action sequences are pretty badass.
That was a question I had,
but this one especially.
Were the French they burning the forests? Were they doing like a deforestation to push the animals out and then they would kill them? Because I was trying to think like why. I mean, it is smoky here in this moment. And what a great scene. But also the other trap that they use is that snare bear trap type thing. I don't think it's quite a bear trap yet,
right?
Which is also used brilliantly when she throws it.
Right.
You know?
Yes. And that's such a cruel way to trap something too.
It is.
That, you know, it really the humans are almost worse than the predator, because the predator, when it kills somebody, at least in this one in Prey, is more humane than the humans. Well, you know? I mean, think about how when they caught Naru, they put her in a cage and they're like poking and prodding at her. That is not something the predator would do. Predator has a little bit of integrity, a little bit of honor.
She even identifies that. She knows that the predator doesn't, like when she's tied up, like, we're not a threat. I mean, I think it's a big question in the movie, like who really are the monsters here? And it was the impending colonizing. There's people coming in and just taking up all of it, which still happens. Just taking all of the actual things that the people live off of. The buffalo and bison, it was insane that they weren't even using the whole animal. That's the monster right there.
All of the animal usages in this film I felt were really, really effective. There's two scenes in particular that I adored. The first one being her fighting the lion in the tree. I want to get a screenshot of when she's in the tree with that mountain lion. It is such a cool night shot, such a cool night sequence of it climbing the tree. Didn't look too CGI.
No, it looks great.
I adored it. It looked very cool, and it was scary. And this is even before we're dealing with the predator. And just to be clear, that lion is who slashed one of her fellow tribesmen, right? That they find, and then she gives him that coldening flower.
Yes.
Were we to believe that was the lion and not the predator? Because the predator had not come across man
I
yet,
think
right?
so, because there's no way that you come in contact with the predator and really live unless you're our main character. You know, I don't think the predator would have just slashed the guy and then he escaped. There's no way.
Yeah, I think you're right on that point. Granted, she isn't able to finish the job with the lion, and her brother does, and has to kind of bring them both back, which is a big point for them. Like, no, you shouldn't come back out because I don't have to drag your ass back
Right.
again. But do you think they ate that lion? That's something I wanted to eat you. Are they eating the lion meat? What does lion taste like?
I don't know if they are. I think they have to get rid of the lion from, because it will scare off the other animals that they need. I think it's mostly to just because I don't think you eat lion either.
You don't eat.
I think
lion.
you use the other parts of the lion. I think the Comanche were probably using
too gamey, right?
Too they're probably using the skin though, and the hide and the nails. Yeah,
okay, that's fair. And essentially, they do pay respect to that which they kill. That is fierce, similar to how the predator does. So, okay, let's say they don't eat the lion, but the next big animal, which I'd be surprised if they had killed the bear,
right,
and not the predator having killed the bear. I think they might have eaten the bear. For some reason, I think they're more likely to eat bear than lion.
I'd say so. Yeah, I think you're right. I think bear meat's probably a little bit better.
But the bear scene. Let's talk about the bear scene
great
for a second, because it really has the two parts. Oh my!
It's goodness. Another moment where I'm scared the dog's gonna die.
Yes, right. And she's so lucky that it chased after the dog when it had made it up the hill instead of just finishing her off. The dog saved her life.
Correct.
100%.
She trained that dog really well. And they
but then of course we have the predator popping out when she seems like she's going to be mauled by the bear.
Right.
And it's a good fight.
A brilliant,
those two go at it for a minute.
A brilliant idea to even have the predator fight a bear. I mean, it may have been where this whole, if I'm a screenwriter, it may have been the whole idea where you get this movie. You're like, what can predator fight? And you're like, predator fighting a bear? Okay. And then you kind of go backwards from there, because it was awesome. It was awesome. And you know what? I will say, for a movie that probably could have gone to the theaters, but we're glad it didn't. It went straight to Hulu. Mm-hmm. Very great production value, especially on some of these, scenes that, like, you could argue could have ruined it if the bear looked more
CGI or whatever the hell. Yeah, no, it knocked it out of the park with the production value. That's one of the things when I first asked you, should it go to the theater, because I felt like some of the shots were just so gorgeous. I wanted to see them on the big screen, similar to what people probably associate with Dancing of the Wolves, just the big sky. You got so much big sky during a lot of the film that you would just want to see on the big screen. That's the only thing that made me really want to see it in the theater, was the cinematography and some of these shots that I felt like would have been overwhelmingly cool. Or when you're sitting on your couch, might detract a little bit. But in terms of the bear scene, when the bear ultimately like crashes through the beaver dam that she's hiding in, it's like right there, his dead head is right there with her. It just again goes back to how immersive I really felt like you were, a bird perched on her shoulder throughout a lot of this movie. They
did a great job. Also, I wanted to mention before we go past, to rewind a little bit and talk about the member who got slashed by the lion. And they did such a good job of setting up, and it was kind of like I didn't put it together right away, because I was thinking when she's stuck in the mud, I'm like, oh, they're going to pay another, great homage to the first Predator when Schwarzenegger covers himself in mud to lower the body.
Right.
But the flower, the orange flower that they established from the mom teaching her to, and then she says it's going to lower his heart rate. It was just really, really smart.
It was. Essentially, that was the replacement for the being covered in mud, because it slows your heart, but it also like coldens the blood or something, the way that they put it. Because at first it seems like, okay, it's just establishing that women they gather the berries while the men do the hunting, right? But obviously she is the inverse of that, totally flips the script with that. But at the same time, she's able to use those same skills that she's expected to know about the plants. And so superbly, she saves the guy who's dying at the beginning. She essentially probably saves the guy who was slashed by the lion by giving him this little orange flower that she then later in the film gives a Frenchman, the only Frenchman that was
Right.
sort of nice to her, who could speak the language, and then using it herself to, not be seen by the predator. I did think that was a really cool way to avoid his heat seeking, because that is one of the other things that I'm always kind of curious about, is what can the predator really
Right.
see and what
Right.
can it see. Because I was dabbling a little bit in Alien versus Predator Requiem, and it just seemed like he could see so much in that
Yeah.
movie that he shouldn't have been able to
Yeah.
see.
I
And
mean,
I mean, in that he goes and essentially dissolves the body of a predator who's already been died, but that body would have been cold. How does it see it? Maybe there's a tracker on him or
mhm.
something, but it seemed like he shouldn't have been able to see stuff that. Yeah, that's one of my. But granted, the AVP movies are not something we probably should be referring to.
uh, no, but it makes a good point, is that every monster should have some sort of Achilles heel, a weakness, and the predator's vision, which is one of its weapons, can also be its if I go back to Predator 2 again, where they're in that weird meat locker warehouse and their whole idea
Mm-hmm.
there blows up in their face. Because Predator can switch that vision, and that comes later, I think, with that helmet, that they can
Right.
adjust which type of temperature or whatever type of view they want to use. That was just another really
Okay.
cool,
That's a
yeah,
good point.
another cool way to level the playing field. Which is another great scene though, when they're escaping and the brother shows up on a horse like a badass.
Yes, yeah, that was a sad when he's tied up. He's like, I just need to get a
Yeah,
horse,
yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
I'll be able
You're
to
like,
do this.
all
All
right.
I need is a horse, and this thing's gone. I could easily take it out if I just had a horse.
Yeah,
He was fun though. I mean, and even when he was being a misogynist jerk to her early in it, he still did it nicely. You know
yes,
what I mean? He wasn't like overpoweringly douchey about
no,
like what they expected gender roles to be. Granted, it was his sister. Maybe it could
right.
have been different. It
I
wasn't
was
his
just
sister,
gonna say
because
that.
obviously we see what happens with the other male tribe
Yeah,
members who do treat her so poorly, and she freaking fights that one dude
I know,
hardcore who's like
I know.
and she puts up a good fight, man.
Yeah, I didn't.
You don't want to mess with Naru.
Yeah, I don't want to defend the gender role, but I think it was because it was his sister, and he was doing it somewhat out of love, and then somewhat he had a role to play within the tribe and against those
Yeah,
the other bros. He's got to look cool.
yeah,
Well, we all know that
and
she's better than all of them.
exactly. Plus, her mom was pretty foreboding character. I don't think either of them necessarily want to piss off the mom. If he was too much of
No,
a jerk to her,
no.
he's gonna get an earful from the
Yeah.
mother. So I totally get that, but it did make him much more likable, and you can't help but root for him, even though his gender ideas are a little
Uh,
off.
right. I
But what do you think about let's on the grander scheme of things? This is a Disney property now. Predator and Alien, both
Yeah,
owned
isn't that
by
weird? Isn't
Disney.
that weird?
Didn't you think it would hurt them more than help them?
Yeah, but they're still
Or
able
that's
to.
not what
Well,
happened.
they're still able to release, under that Fox banner. And I think ultimately this only means that you won't see this on Disney Plus. Although they have
Okay.
started to change the Disney Plus app where you need a special login if you want to see stuff that's not intended for a younger audience. You can set that up as a family, um, so kids can't see like the new Deadpool movies that will most likely still be
Mm.
on that plane of violence.
What is the basis of having, because Hulu is owned by Disney?
Right.
Why not just then merge the two? Just Disney Plus then has essentially, like you said, the stuff that's going to be more adult, and you need to have a proper login. Do you see the value in having two different streaming ports?
Yeah, they do different things. Hulu has the whole TV aspect. You can do Hulu Live. They've got the whole Fox library
Okay.
they're able to get away with, right now. And I think inevitably you will see them merge because you've got big platforms like HBO that has like Warner Brothers. They just bought, or Discovery Plus is merging.
And Discovery,
Yeah, and I
yeah.
think
Essentially HBO Max is done in a year, and they're going to have like a whole new one or
right,
something.
and that's
what I was reading.
all these apps are basically finding a way to turn into their own libraries, but their own basic, like their own cable platform ultimately. I mean, so
Mhm.
yeah, maybe it's not a bad idea that they do end up, merging into one platform. Like this is all the Disney stuff and all the Fox stuff, so it doesn't get. I mean, you kind of have to if you want to compete, but yeah, it's also scary when Disney.
Are they really concerned with calling it like a Fox production anymore? Though I know you're going to keep like the Fox header on movies that were made back then, but like Fox isn't making anything anymore, right? There is no 20th Century Fox anymore. It's been absorbed by.
It's
Disney.
been absorbed, but
so
I think it still might be a division of.
Is it?
It just really means they own the properties. So, and the only real reason they did that was for the Marvel characters that they needed to get their hands on. That's what it all comes down to. Is Disney just wants everyone to play in their sandbox.
Is it the Fantastic Four specifically that they had? And X-Men and the Fantastic Four are the ones
were Fox.
Yes. Fox had. I get it. Okay, cool.
But now they have
really quick. There was
Alien and Predator.
But now they have
Alien and Predator.
I know, and Buffy. And they own Buffy now too, which is very exciting. Speaking of Buffy and like the mythos that's created there, I love how they did bring in the Comanche Mupitsi. She said, because when they're asking her, what did you see? It was like a Mupitsi, which is this mythological giant in Comanche, which I thought was cool. It was just so fun to get actual
folklore.
History of the lore. I dug
that's the cool thing, and it needs to be respected and done right, like Prey. But when you see these other movies that are just like, we're going to pluck this from Native American folklore, like the Wendigo, or they've got all this amazing folklore that needs to be done right and by the right voices. And I was really glad too that they tried to compare Predator to something within their own mythos too.
Here's a quick question though, because you mentioned it's the first cast all with Native American descendancy. What about the guy who played the Predator, Dane DeLaGero?
Yeah, apparently the guy used to be a basketball player.
Is him too?
I don't know.
Is he also?
I don't know.
Okay, all right. They should. That would be cool if he didn't. But at the same time, if you're gonna make anybody a non-Native American, make this white guy.
Well, do you know the history of the actor of the original Predator? The original Predator.
No.
The original Predator was Jean-Claude Van Damme. That's not a joke.
I didn't know
the original
that.
actor in the Predator movie, and I think they shot a good amount with Jean-Claude Van Damme. The Predator costume was completely different looking. It kind of looked like a giant ant eater type thing. Was not as scary.
Oh wow.
Jean-Claude Van Damme had passed out a couple times in this suit. So they scrapped it.
Because they were filming in the jungles of Mexico.
Yes, and
so it would make sense. It's gonna be crazy.
They end up scrapping that creature design. They lose Van Damme, which was weird that he had agreed to do it anyway, when his face isn't even shown. And they get this other actor, and I'm blanking on his name. I think it's Kevin Peter Hall or something like that. He goes on to play Predator, almost like Freddy Krueger. It's like the same actor throughout up until I think he did the Alien versus Predators, but yeah, I think he was not involved in the Predators movie, but
okay, yeah,
tall guy.
And plus, so you're telling me there was a different Predator look. Was it still Stan Winston? Because I know Stan Winston's the one that created this one. He designed the Predator we know.
That's a great question. I don't know who.
That's unknown.
I would say, this is me just making a guess now. I'm going to say no. I'm going to say they brought him in to save the day.
Yeah.
But that's something I want to look up now that you bring that up, because that's just interesting.
It is. The last shot I just want to mention, because me and my Jurassic Park fandom, I really felt like the shot where they're running through the tall grass.
Oh yeah,
And the Predator's chasing them, but he's invisible, so all you see is the grass going down. It reminded me of the Raptors chasing them in The Lost World.
Yeah.
Toward the latter half of that movie. It brought me back, because I love that sequence, and I just love that overhead shot of running through tall grass. Just hits home. I don't know, something about it just hits home.
Especially when at the start of the movie we find out that they're in the plains. We need to see that. We need to see, and I'm really glad that they filmed that scene. Well, I guess you can see a little bit of it with the wolf scene, but not to the degree of excitement as
Not quite
being
the
chased
same.
through it.
The overhead. There's something about that,
Yeah.
It just worked. It just worked. What else? Is there anything else you want to talk about with this lovely franchise that I'm really hoping does do a Prey 2 and comes half close to matching how good this one was? But it's hard to pull off a rebooted sequel, let alone
Absolutely.
sequel.
I mean, I was really impressed. I knew going into it. I mean, there was some early reviews that how good it was, and I was really hoping those were true, and I was really impressed. I really enjoyed this movie. I'm also really, really glad they decided to go the way they did and not just pick a man to play this part, that it was about a young woman who, against all odds, her tribe didn't believe in her. Her mother barely believed in her. Her dad, though, you have to wonder, he gave her that hatchet, which turns out to be a really cool weapon throughout the movie. You kind of have to think that the father secretly knew that she was going to be a warrior.
He knew that she was going to be badass. Yes. Yeah. And that hatchet comes in so handy when she does get stuck in the, was it quicksand, quick mud, just some sort of marsh? Because that's such a fun scene.
Was.
That's one of my fears, man, to just get sucked into the earth like she does.
I know.
Just move a little bit and you sink further and further. It comes in handy then, attaching that little rope.
Oh man,
to the hatchet.
I think it cool. Showed that she's how she can adapt and improvise, and I think that not only made her a better hunter, but it made her. It also ultimately saved her life. The way she's able to use that weapon, and I mean, how cool is it when she comes back to her tribe? She's got the green blood on her face, carrying the head, and they're like, "New war chief," and like there was nobody who was complaining about it. Monster killer.
Yeah, I mean, I always do wonder about that blood though, because I mean, you think about alien blood being so acidic. This is apparently a safe blood because they'd be touching it left and right.
Right. Well, you have to just hope that the predator has a similar makeup that we do. It's just different body temperatures is really all it was.
That's true. And yeah, they do mention in The Predator that it does have human DNA in it. There is some human DNA within the Predator.
So someone had sex with an alien.
Something to that. On that note,
stay away from aliens.
Well, yeah.
Stay away from predators.
You gotta watch it. Prey's amazing. I'm hoping for more. And unless you got anything else, stay alive, people.